Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Banquet Hall podcast. My name is Kyler Nathan. I am your host as always. If this is your first time tuning into the pod, make sure you follow the pod on socials at Banquet Hall Pod. You can also tap in at thefourthkyler.com to check out some of our earlier episodes. Blessed to be joined by another longtime friend of mine, Trae. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm really happy to be here.
And happy to have you. If y'all are watching on YouTube or with the video function on Spotify, y'all see Trae got the 8K camera that he stole from Steven Spielberg himself and the velvet blue do-rag ready to make a movie on this podcast.
Gotta have the do-rag. The do-rag is my signature.
Hey, I love the do-rag. If I had my hair in twist right now, best believe I would have pulled out my purple velvet do-rag so we could have matching do-rags on the pod. But that'll be a no for when we do an in-person episode in the future.
Dope.
But I like to get started with just random icebreaker questions just to get the conversation flowing and also give our listeners an opportunity to tap in with what their response might be. So Trae, as someone who is invested in storytelling and film, what I want to know from you is what are your 5 films, or what are 5 films, not necessarily the 5 films, but 5 films that are integral to who you are. These can either be films that inspire you, guilty pleasures, any 5 films that come to mind.
For sure. I mean, I guess off the top of my head, the movie that always comes up for me, and as someone who watches a lot of movies, and that loves a lot of movies for a wide variety of movies for a lot of different reasons, it's always hard answering this question because I don't have one favorite film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'd say the film that kind of always kind of rises to the top at in the back of my mind whenever I'm asked this question is Moonlight, Barry Jenkins' Moonlight, because it was the film that made a light bulb click in my head that, oh, I could also do this thing. I
Mm.
could also make a movie from this perspective. Um, you know, myself being a gay black man, it's it's never you I never felt completely included anywhere.
Mm.
I never obviously, and we can talk more about that later, kind of my backstory,
Yeah.
but just generally speaking, black people a lot of times don't feel included in heavily white spaces, but queer black people of all variety generally don't feel included in straight black spaces.
Mm.
So, at least for myself, that was my experience growing up. I think as I've gotten older, I've learned ways how to kind of make that okay in my mind because you kind of have to.
Yeah.
I don't want to, be pouting in my room, you know, saying complaining about how I'm not included. Because I don't feel like I need to be included in everything anymore. But generally speaking, going back to the movie, not to go off too much on a tangent, Moonlight specifically made me see that the thing inside of myself that made me feel isolated could also be something that transcended my experience and my career and the trajectory of my life in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a very emotional experience. And I'm not particularly religious, but I find that my biggest spiritual experiences are from movies and
Mm.
excellent TV shows and really just kind
Mm.
of diving into the minds and lives of these characters that feel so whole. And Moonlight was definitely one of those things for one of those films for me. And I mean, it's the first screenplay that I've ever read. It made me change my major and change the complete trajectory of my life. So definitely, obviously, that's number one. Um, and then some other ones for different reasons.
Yeah.
Do you know the movie Hereditary?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ari Aster, I mean, I love that movie because, well, one, it's insane. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it's like off the wall crazy. But I love it because it's one of those movies where I always think back about the experience. I saw it in theaters like 4 times. I
Dang.
always think back to the experience of watching it the first time and having it like starts out. with the camera pushing in on this like bisected miniature of like a house, and it's pushing in on it, and you're like, okay, it's just a miniature, it's just a miniature, and then it pushes in and frames up a room, the top room in the house, and all of a sudden you're inside of the house. So from that moment, I should have known that the movie was going to be crazy, but it was not. I couldn't have expected what was to come.
No
And
one can.
I love movies that make me feel like, wow, I don't know what that experience was, but I want that again. Um,
Mm,
and also like on the technical side, the fact that he made it for $10 million, the fact that everything was most of the film was on a set, was built, and but it looked, as like a filmmaker, I can see why they decided to opt into building a set versus using locations
mm,
and how that maximized their budget. Because sometimes it's cheaper to shoot on location, sometimes it's cheaper to build a set. Really, it just depends on where you are and what your budget allows. But the fact that they were able to do so much with 10 million, and for anyone who doesn't know, making a $10 million movie is very difficult,
very
like a feature
difficult.
film, and making it really good and exceptional in the way that I think Hereditary is just so hard. So the fact that to see what they did with that and the performances, I mean, it's just an outstanding movie. Really, it really goaded Ari Aster in my mind. Um, and I'll just like list off a few others. Another one is Hell or High Water. Um, it's the reason I love that movie is because it's a simple story, but it's very layered. And I think in my mind, I think the script was like maybe 100 pages or something like that, which it's a page per minute, so it's under 2 hours. Um,
Okay.
it takes place in the middle of nowhere, centered around these two characters trying to rob banks in the area that are foreclosing on people's homes, and in particular, one of the main characters' ranch. Um, and if they foreclose on the ranch, he has nothing to leave his kid, and he doesn't really have a way out. So this is kind of the only thing he has left to do. It's a twisting story. It's like a modern western.
Okay.
Um, it's written by the same guy who did why am I forgetting the name of that show? Ah, man, the one with the cows, the ranchers. Yellowstone, yes, the same guy
Yes.
the same guy who the showrunner of Yellowstone. This was one of his scripts, and you could tell it's very Yellowstone coded. It's very cowboy,
Mm,
at least white cowboy coded. But I love it because the story is simple, but it's very layered, and I think after watching that script and watching that movie and reading the script, again, it really exemplified um, how to do a lot with a little,
mm,
and you really got to kind of be able to do that as a filmmaker and honestly as an artist in general, because art is so defunded and honestly stigmatized, even
yeah.
though people love consuming art but they hate artists. But that's different. That's a whole different thing. um yeah, but I think it when I think about that movie, I think about how much it did with such a small budget. Um, and again, performances were great, and a couple other like they're not guilty pleasures. I don't really have guilty pleasures. I stand 10 toes down on every movie that I love. I don't really
As
care.
we should.
Because literally, you know, that's just me. But particularly in the case of this next one, Godzilla, the 1998 one, the one
Okay.
people hate this movie so much, but I love it so much. It's an integral part of my childhood. It was the first, at least in my active memory,
Mm,
the first like creature feature, huge scale, monster destroying city movie that I'd ever seen as a kid. And at the time, the VFX just looked so real. I mean, now it
yeah.
does not, but it
In
looks so
retrospect.
real. It looks so real. And I was just in awe. And every time I think about that movie, I think about how how beyond this world films made me feel and TV shows made me
Mm,
feel as a kid. And I always kind of go back to movies like that movie particularly. I named that one because it was the first one in my active memory, but there's a lot of them like that. Um, and whenever I get like despondent about the industry or career stuff, I always go back to movies like that to remind myself why I want to do what I want to do. Even though I'm a lot more intellectual about the films that I want to work on now, sometimes I need to like cut that crap. I just need to just go back to the base of the just dumb fun movies of the past. That didn't feel like a dumb fun cash grab movie. That's I feel like that's the
mm,
difference between those kinds of movies and the dumb fun movies now, because there wasn't
yeah,
a Godzilla. There were other Godzilla movies, but they were nothing like that one particular. That one was
yeah,
like a moment in time. Um, yeah, so love that one. And then the last one is, do you know the Anaconda movies?
yeah.
So not the JLo one. That one's fine. But the second one's great. If anyone has not seen the second one, that one's great. Again, another movie where I'm like, oh, as a kid, the VFX look insane. Those snakes, I thought that's how big snakes were. Like I really, in my mind, that's exactly like swallowing humans whole. Yeah, that was it. And again, similar to Godzilla, dumb fun, but like at the time, peak cinema for me. Yeah. So yeah,
I,
those are my five.
I love your description of each of those five because I think it's such a it's a window into the life of someone who really loves film because you have like your Oscar winners, your ones that are like, oh, I love the technicalities of it, I love the performances and all of this. Then you have your ones who are like, yo, this is just like this is dumb fun. This is just great. Because I feel like a lot of times when I talk about some of my horror movies that I tell people, like, oh, you just have to watch this. I
Yeah.
love giving people ones that are like, hey, I'm not saying this is a good movie.
Yeah.
I'm saying you need to watch this movie, and there is a
Exactly.
stark difference.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Because as you were talking, I was thinking of some of those dumb fun movies that I like. And shout out to the latest Godzilla movie, Godzilla X Kong, or
Yeah.
Godzilla Kong, how it's
Yeah.
properly
Yeah.
called. Because that's a
Whatever.
dumb fun movie.
No, for sure. So, although I will say it's a very pro ape movie. Like it
Absolutely.
does not feel like Godzilla should be it feels like Kong X Godzilla. I will say, I feel like, but it's fine. Kong deserves his shine too.
And minor spoiler alert for the movie. You've seen the movie, I
Yeah,
presume,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah,
minor spoiler alert for the movie. If y'all don't want to hear a spoiler, fast forward like 20 seconds. When Godzilla picks up little Diddy Kong and starts throwing him around, I'm like, this is cinema. This is why we come to the
yeah.
movies.
That was oh man. Everyone was dying in the theater when that happened. That was a great time. That was a great
Yeah.
time.
And that's why I love good theater experiences too, because when people are bought in, they're locked in, the suspension of disbelief is there, and you're just having a good time.
Yeah.
Because one of my fondest cinema memories and like first theater experiences, I think the first movie I saw in theaters multiple times was the first Transformers movie. Like
Hmm.
that is core Kyler, because I'm
Yeah.
just at my core, I'm a young boy who had Transformers action figures, and if you show me this nice ass Camaro transforming into Bumblebee and shooting stuff,
Yeah.
is it product placement? Is it a Chevy
Oh yeah.
commercial? Maybe.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
it is. But are these giant robots like giving me thrill and adrenaline right now?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, for sure. I feel that. I feel
So,
that.
listeners, let us know your dumb fun movies that you like in the comments or on the Spotify poll. I'll quickly shout out a few more films that I feel are integral to me. One, Jordan Peele's Us. I
Mhm.
absolutely love just the cinematography of Us, Lupita's performances in Us. I think that's a fantastic movie. American Fiction, to choose a newer one. Really
Mhm.
enjoyed the screenplay for that, and I felt like it was a really good look into what being a writer can be like from different black perspectives. Like
Mhm.
absolutely not a perfect movie, but I just love just kind of the script for that one. Another dumb fun one, but I actually stand hard that this is a good movie. Lego Batman, one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life. And I've said that probably 5 times on this podcast, so listeners know that I really mean that when I say that's one of the best movies of all time. Um, and then I got to give it up for like peak cinema for me. Like Best theater experience I ever had at Avengers Endgame. Like when you
I feel
think
it.
of just the growth of the Marvel universe and how much of an event movie that was,
Yeah.
like I was like, oh, this means something. And I think that is a testament to what you said a little bit earlier about how there's a spiritual sensation you can get when you watch a film that you really resonate with and that you really get. Like I never heard it described that way, but when you said that, I'm like, that's something that's so pure and so real when you have
Yeah.
a very strong emotional reaction to characters or to the screenplay, whatever it may be. So I love how you describe that.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
Trey, let's get into the actual interview. I feel like we could sit here and talk about movies for probably like 3 hours.
I definitely
Uh,
could.
but the first formal question I always like to kind of lead people in with is getting to know the guest background. So Trey, where are you from and how did that shape the person you have become and are in the process of becoming?
For sure. Um, but I guess we can take it back, all the way back. I was born in Jamaica, in the middle of nowhere, not Kingston. Um, I grew up in a very small community, where everyone knew everyone, everyone was related one way or another. Um, and yeah, I lived there until I just I was about to turn 13. I lived there with my mom, my great grandmother, everyone on my mom's side. My father was already living in the U.S. He had already moved here back in 2001, um, with my other siblings and my stepmom. Um, but I moved here to live with him when I was 13, or when I was just about to turn 13, um, for school and to just like have a better opportunity. It's what, you're
Yeah.
always told as an immigrant. And, for the most part, I've been able to do a lot more for myself here than I would have been able to do in Jamaica, but it's not perfect.
Hmm.
Could be better. Um, but yes, so yeah, when I moved here, I was supposed to be in the seventh grade when I moved here, but I skipped to the eighth grade because the school structure is just different here versus in Jamaica. Like in Jamaica, we were taking like 16 subjects at once. And so
Hmm.
like I was learning Spanish and French at once.
Oh wow.
Should have kept that up, but I did not. Um, and doing a whole bunch of other things. And so because of that, I was able to move to the eighth grade. And I was only in the eighth grade for like one semester, because of the time of the year I started. I actually started school on my birthday, um,
Happy
here in
birthday.
America, which is funny. um, and so yeah, I did that for one semester. Then I culminated and went to high school. Um, Went to a medical magnet high school in LA. Um, and it was a it was, for me, it was a good experience. School was my reprieve, or my respite from life. Because growing up as, again, like I said, as a gay black man or kid at the time, it you find yourself isolated pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and that was definitely my experience. And so school, I threw myself into school because I felt like I belonged there. Like I was always supported in school. I was always told that I was great, that I was going to do great things. And so I kind of went where I was wanted. And so for that reason, I did really good in school. Met some lifelong friends that I'm still super close with right now, my best friends, actually. And yeah, did that. The reason I went to medical magnet school in the first place is because my dad wanted me to be a doctor. That was like his thing. I'm so glad I didn't choose to do that. Like looking at what doctors go through now and the way that they're kind of weaponized as these tools to screw us over. Really super glad that I have no part in that. But at the time, he thought that that was the only respectable and financially sound way to move about a career. And I just wholly disagreed. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I kind of flip flopped a lot before I went to college. I, know that the doctor thing was never going to work out. I knew that completely. But I considered being a lawyer,
Hmm.
politics, crazy. I'd rather be a doctor. Um,
And that's saying something.
really. But ultimately, I applied to a lot of schools as an environmental engineering major, or environmental sciences in some schools. Got into UCSD. Honestly, the only reason I came to UCSD is because Aaliyah was coming. My best friend came to UCSD. Got into a lot of schools. Got into a lot of prestigious schools, but ultimately, like I, I went one out first. I went where the money was because
You got to do
UCSD
that.
was offering a full scholarship, and that sounded nice to me. Paying for school just didn't. It wasn't ringing the bells that I wanted it to ring. Um, and Aaliyah was going there. It just felt right. Like I didn't. And honestly, I only applied to UCSD because Aaliyah was applying to UCSD. So honestly, if she wasn't, I wouldn't have gone there, which is so interesting. Um, but yeah, so decided to go to UCSD. Went there as an environmental engineering major, started taking some of the precursor classes. Um, did not enjoy it. Not for
Fair.
me. Not for me at all. It only lasted like 2 quarters or maybe like a quarter and a half. But at UCSD, I discovered Triton Television, or TTV, the like student run film studio, and that really kind of changed it for me. I think that happened at the same time that Moonlight happened. Like I
Mm,
started UCSD in 2016, and Moonlight came out, at least I think in wide release, came out in 2016. Um, and after seeing Moonlight, I saw it. I remember distinctly remember seeing it in the late fall, and I joined TTV like around this similar time, and it was kind of like the perfect confluence of events because I saw the movie and I was so moved by it, but I didn't know how to channel that energy that I was feeling. But then being in Triton TV, it just everything kind of aligned because
mm,
it we were really focused on all the technical stuff. Everyone in there loved movies. We would talk about movies all the time. We would have screenings. We had a lot of infrastructure set up to where we would be making our own films, small projects. We would have student-run film festivals uh, every quarter. We'd have a bigger film festival at the end of the year. It was just the infrastructure was there, and I kind of just fell into it, changed my major, and kind of the rest of it. Basically, the rest of my I spent the rest of the first year and like the first half of the second year really just going hard, just
mm-hmm.
making stuff, kind of rubbing shoulders with people that were older than me, that knew more than me, um, just learning a lot. And then my second year, I decided that I wanted to do an honors thesis film, which is so funny that that's when I decided to do that. But I just wanted, after switching over to the media major, what at the time was technically, I guess, the film production major, or
Mm-hmm.
the film major. Um, Switching over into it, I quickly realized that it was not funded the way that the rest of them, certainly not the way that the engineering majors were funded or any of the STEM majors were funded. We, our one of the buildings that we took classes in allegedly had mold in it.
Oh God.
Um, like it was not doing what it needed to do. But I will say one of the treasures of that department was the media lab. Um, the fact that we had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment at our disposal if we just took advantage of it, I thought was very exceptional, and I still think it was very exceptional. Um, and so I made the most use of that. I rubbed some shoulders there and started working there, and I worked there for the 3 years. For the rest of the last 3 years, I was at UCSD. Um, and yeah, just cultivated my honors thesis. I was working 3 jobs, saving up money to make the project. Um, I really threw my all into it. I kind of shirked all the rest of my responsibilities to do that for 3 years. I lived on a couch for all of third year so I could save on rent, to invest into the film. And yeah, I did the film my last year, starting the summer before my last year. It was a crazy ride. We can talk more about that if you want.
Hey, that's what podcasting is about.
A lot of wild things happen. Um, and ultimately the film wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. It wasn't 100% of the vision that I had in my mind, but no film really ever is. I'd say it was probably like it got like 65% of the way there, which is respectable for the scale and the scope of what I wanted to cover at my level at the time. Um, but obviously, like my successive projects, I keep wanting to improve on the percentage of my vision that I'm able to execute. Um, so that's kind of been my goal in successive projects. But finished the thesis film, graduated, moved back to LA, um, and moved back to LA right when the pandemic started. So that really kind of shifted a lot for me. Productions were I still was on a few productions as like a production assistant at the time, but we were like double masked up and we had like face guards, and it was not an ideal experience. Um, and I'm not someone that like feels the need to always be on set. Like I don't want to be on set unless it's a good set, unless it's a well
Gotcha.
ran set, because otherwise it's an awful experience. Like I won't even sugarcoat it. If the set is ran poorly, it will make you not want to be a filmmaker anymore. It'll make you not
Uh,
want to work in the industry at all anymore.
yeah, I've heard
And
nightmare stories about bad sets.
like I'm not the person who, and because I'm not the person who will do anything to be on set. I think my journey post college has been a little slower, at least in my mind. Like all most people the journey is slow, but in my mind, what I thought I was going to be doing versus what I am doing, it's a little slower. Um, I'm doing fine, but I think I didn't realize at the time how difficult it is to maintain creative integrity, how expensive it is, how nearly impossible it is.
Can you
Um,
define creative integrity for the listeners? In your
yeah,
own words, of course.
no, for sure. Um, in my mind, creative integrity is maintaining what it is that made you want to do the thing in the first place and keeping on that track as much as possible throughout your journey. Obviously, shifting and changing based on what is required of you to get where you want to be. But I don't, especially right now, for instance, in the social media era that we're in, that really has exploded exponentially since the pandemic. Um, I think now rivaling the film industry, if in some cases surpassing it, unfortunately, in kind of its share of the market. Um,
Mm.
you are incentivized to do things that might not be true to who you are and who you want to be artistically, creatively, personally. And I'm just not about that shit. Like I'm not. I don't. Making stuff is really hard. It's not.
Yeah.
It could be grueling, and as someone that has ADHD, it is often grueling. It is often really difficult to wrangle my mind to the point where I'm able to execute what I want to execute. And so being incentivized to do stupid shit on the internet for laughs and really veer completely away from what it is that you actually want to do, there's a big pull for you to do that. There's a big pull for you to try to be like everyone else and do what everyone else is doing, everyone that's successful. But for me, artistic creative integrity is just saying I'm going to figure out a way to do it the way that I want to do it. I'm going to
Mhm.
shift and change and move. By the end of the day, it has to stay true to the core of who I am and why it is that I started doing this. And that's just really difficult. Yeah.
Hey, it's difficult as hell, but you're preaching to the choir, of course. I think that We're even kind of talking about it right before we started the actual podcast, but even the feeling that I have when I'm about to start an interview, I'm like, all right, let me tell them to follow on socials. Let me tell them to like, subscribe. I don't want to do all that. I just want to talk the talk. And I think the more that I'm able to remind myself of the pursuit of creating or keeping that creative integrity,
Yeah,
it helps the creation, it helps the art.
yeah,
Because there's been plenty of people like, oh, you should do like short form content, do TikToks. I'm like, no, I want long form content.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want 90 seconds. I want people who want to listen to people for an hour to hour and
yeah.
a half.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. I mean, funny enough, I mean, I have the way that I've been able to sustain myself is working in social media over the past 4 years. Um, because the pay is good.
Yeah,
It's way better than the film industry. I mean, they don't want to pay you shit unless
not at
you
all.
have all the money in the world. You only get paid a lot if you already have all the money in the world. But that's just across the board at this point in this country. That's a different story. But I I keep myself at an arm's distance away from the social media space. I'm not TikTok is cool, is fun. I work in the space, so I have to be on it to understand how to utilize it. It's the same with Instagram. Um, those are the two main platforms that I work on for my day jobs. Um, but I do that so that I can fund and supplement the resources for my actual projects. Like there's no part of me that even is worried about me getting stuck in that space because it's just impossible. It's just impossible. Like it is a means to an end and that's all. Um, and so yeah, I feel confident in saying that I'm on the path that I need to be on, but I'm again just learning to roll with the punches, learning to be okay with certain things being slower than others, and just being grateful that I'm able to afford rent
Hey,
in a recession.
hey, gratitude is something that we all could use more of. And sometimes you do just have to look back and like, hey, I can afford rent, I got food in my belly, and just be grateful for the little things while also still being critical of the systems at play.
Absolutely.
But just being able to practice that gratitude, I think, is so important. And I
Yeah.
just appreciate you walking us through that journey of like when you're discovering your love for film, the ways that you've been able to practice it in a collegiate environment, because I think those are also the stories, especially when I first started doing this podcast, that
Mhm.
I felt were really impactful because not everybody goes to college, not everybody has access to
Yeah.
college environments. So when people hear
Mhm.
about what happens outside of the classroom, because you didn't mention a lot about things that happen in the classroom.
Please. Well, I don't know what the hell was happening in those classrooms, but I had a few good experiences, I will say. A few professors that really helped me out.
Yeah.
But on a whole, I didn't go to college for the classes.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fine to say. And I think more people need to hear that because when I used to work in admissions, I would tell people all the time, like, yes, you can have your major called whatever,
Yeah,
but a lot of that doesn't matter. Like, yes, if you want to be an engineer, you probably need an engineering degree,
yeah,
but what are you doing with that degree? Who are you talking to? Who are
exactly.
you rubbing elbows with? Like, who are you in these rooms with and having these conversations? That takes you a lot further than what the syllabus is going to say.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that I see it is if you only got what is on the syllabus, if the only thing that you took out of college is what was outlined for you, then you only got what everyone else got. And that's
Yeah.
not really an exceptional experience. For me, I got everything else. I got the syllabus stuff, and there's definitely value to that. But if that was the only thing that I got, I would have felt cheated. Um, and at the time while I was in college, I did feel cheated. But I think
Mm.
having some space away from it, I realized, and I don't know how much this was UCSD versus the people, but regardless, the experiences that I had in TTV, the experiences that I had working at the theater down there, close by school, and um, all the people that I met, the opportunities that I had from the experiences and the people that I met, I wouldn't have had in LA. Sure, I would have had different experiences. There's a lot of film schools in LA, but the film schools in LA, the culture is just completely different. It's very competitive. In UCSD,
Mm-hmm.
I was competing with myself
Mm,
because I wasn't trying to be the best of the crop, the cream of the crop. I was trying to be the best I could be. And I was able to do that because I didn't feel like I was competing with anyone else.
mm,
I felt like I was on my own level. In LA, you're competing with people that have parents to fund their entire all their projects, to make them to hire people who are professionals. I didn't have that. I worked 3 years to save up $30,000 to make a film. I didn't have parents to give me $30,000 so I can focus on actually making the film good. The reason why
mm.
my thesis film I think suffered in the way that I think it suffered was because I was working 3 jobs for 3 years and I never took a break and I slept on a couch for an entire year and I was trying to do everything on my own and yeah, like that it suffered because of that, not because I wasn't good enough, but because I was pushing myself to an extent that most people at my level do not. um and so I think if I went to school in LA, I don't I'm sure I would still find it in myself to strive for greatness, but I think I would feel a lot more discouraged.
Hmm.
There were rich people in the film program in our school. There were international students that were driving Lamborghinis. They were there, but they were the exception, not the rule. In
Right.
LA, if you're at USC Film School, if you're at UCLA Film School, if you're at AFI, they're the rule. They're the ones that get in. They're the ones that can pay $60,000 a year and not work for 4 years or for 2 years and just focus on making their films. Again, there are exceptions who aren't able to do that. Who's like my roommate, my previous roommate. Her father is well to do, but she's one of the people who is not really she's not like begging daddy for money every second. She's like actually trying to make something for herself. And so she was functioning. Obviously she had a good foundation, but she was functioning in a similar way where she went to AFI and she had to work to pay rent. She wasn't asking her dad to pay her rent. She had to, eat cereal every night. But even someone that doesn't have a foundation like that, which I didn't, and I still, I didn't have the time, if I were to go to a school like AFI or UCLA or USC, I would be in an even worse position than I was at
Mm.
UCSD because they literally like on the AFI application they say, "Hey, know that you will not be working these 2 years while you're in this film program because
I
we're going
did
to
read
work you
that.
to the bone. There's not going to be a single second left in the day for you to actually make a living. So figure it out." That's not conducive to my success. So I'm very grateful for what I was able to get out of UCSD. But like I said, I didn't get it because I was following the syllabus. I got it because I saw the syllabus and I was like, yeah, this isn't enough for me. So I have to do more. I have to do more than that to get to the point where I want to be. So yeah.
Mm. Love everything you just said. And I think that you gave us a good overview of like a lot of the passion behind it, a lot of the obstacles that have come up. And I'm curious, before we get more into specific things that you've done, how do you define yourself as a creative person? Because obviously we've been throwing around the word filmmaker, but for
Mhm.
listeners who may not know what all that entails, how do you define your work as a creative?
For sure. I I've been, I've been forced to do a lot of things to in the film space, in the media space, because I mean, you need to, I need to make a living. Like I was saying, listen, I was poor my entire life. I was not American poor. I was Jamaica poor.
Mm,
That's a different kind of poor. And so being able to get to the point where I'm now, I'm not sacrificing a living. I'm not gonna be a starving artist. That's just not an option for me personally. Um, so I've worn a lot of hats, but generally speaking, my foundation and my focus as an artist is as a screenwriter, and as a director. Um, yeah, and my aim is to, and the way that I kind of see my trajectory, my career is to be an auteur, someone who is deeply invested in the, again, going back to that term, creative integrity of the project, someone who was very invested in seeing a story through and making sure that it is just artistically sound, that it doesn't end up becoming vacuous and shallow because that's what you think your audience wants, but instead it asks more of the audience. It asks the audience to kind of lean in order to understand, in order to grasp the full extent of the story, of the themes of the story, all of it. I think those are obviously the best works. Like, it should be fun. It should be entertaining. We go to the movies to be entertained, one way or another. We watch television shows to be entertained, but part of that entertainment is that spiritual experience that is required of an auteur, a spiritual connection to the art, to the medium, to what you're able to do, the power of the medium. Um, so in my mind, that's who I am. But I think just the bare bones of it, a screenwriter and a director. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said about why we go to the movies and just those reactions that you have. Because as I grow more and more in love with film, as I'm reading more books about screenwriting,
Yeah.
as I'm watching movies differently, I can feel my brain shifting how I watch movies. Sometimes I'm like, damn, can I ever just enjoy a movie the same? But I'm learning to enjoy it in a different way, is what I'm coming to
Yeah.
understand.
Absolutely.
Um, but those moments I'm in the theater, I'm like, wow, like I love this character. Then I'm thinking about why do I love this character? What do I relate
Yeah.
to? What are they doing? What am
Yeah.
I seeing them do? And then sometimes when characters fall flat and I can't relate to them. And I think that one of the biggest ways that my experiences and my love for film have started to coincide is
Mm-hmm.
thinking through like us as black folks, so black folks with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different identities, who are the characters that we relate to, even if they don't look like us, and
Definitely.
how much more impactful can some of these characters be if they did look like us? And so my question within that is, with someone who holds your identities,
Mm-hmm.
how do your identities show up in your craft as a screenwriter, as a director, and how you're viewing the film industry?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And I love what you said about that particular point that you made about how do we relate to characters even if they don't look like us? Because that's been a huge part of my experience. Like, if we go back to the films that I listed, like 4 out of 5 of them don't really have that many black people in it. Like, one of them doesn't really have any black, or a couple of them don't really have any black people in it. But I've learned to accept that as a part of what film history is, particularly American film history, Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote. It is what it is, but I'm here now. We're here now, and it's our responsibility to. I don't. I don't look at it as telling black stories, but in telling our stories, the way
Mm-hmm.
I think sharing our perspective with our audience, with the world, we're sharing a black experience, regardless of how it pans out. It's a black experience because it's coming from a black person.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal is to take the best parts, the most impactful parts of my favorite films, and really transmuting that, really running that through the lens of my mind and seeing what that produces, seeing what that projects on the page when I'm writing, on my computer when I'm visualizing what it is that I'm trying to make, and through the camera lens when I'm actually shooting something. I don't, I'm not, I don't really care. I think at this late date, in the past, it's fine that they were black films and they were films. They
Mm-hmm.
were separated. It is what, hey, can't do anything about it now. But at this late date, like you mentioned, American Fiction, I don't see American Fiction or Us. I don't see Us as a black film. I see it as a film, full stop.
Yeah.
That's it. And so I think for me, I need to see it in that way in order to not feel like I'm making a pastiche, like I'm making like something that's hollow and empty. Because if you pursue to make a black film, then you're not going to make a great film. And that might be a hot take. I hope it's not. I really hope it's not. I really hope I don't sound ridiculous. But
I don't think so.
you're a black person. It's a black film by the nature of you being a black filmmaker. You don't have to qualify it. Just seek to make a great film with great, well-rounded, interesting characters and an interesting unfolding of events that leave your audience either wanting more or just feeling completely satisfied. Again, it's a spiritual experience. It transcends boundaries. There's a lot of the films that I like don't have any black people in it. That's just by the very nature of like the white people they've had some gems. They've had some great stuff in the film world. But it's not because they're exceptional. It's just because they're the only ones that were allowed to do it for a very long time. Now it's time for, again, like just like Jordan Peele, just like a lot of the black filmmakers that are making their mark right now. I think the ones that are doing the best are the ones that are trying to make great films,
Mm-hmm.
knowing, feeling confident in their blackness that they don't have to signify their films as a black film. Like Jordan Peele has respect because he has respect himself. He has respect for the craft, for the genres that he's working in, for the crews that he's working with. Um, and I want to be able to embody that and tell the stories, tell the great stories that I want to tell. Obviously, with black people at the center of it, obviously wanting to have black faces, black bodies on screen, doing a whole, you know, array of things, um, exemplifying them in a whole array of ways. And particularly, I think the reason why I emphasized in the beginning why I'm not interested in making black films is because I'm not really interested in doing corrective promotion of black
Mm.
people. I don't really care. I know an array of black people, some of the best, some of the fucking worst. And I'm not interested in only telling the story of the best ones. I find terrible people very interesting. I find the
Much more
worst people
interesting.
just so fascinating because how the fuck did we get here? I am interested in exploring those elements of personality. And there should be people that are interested in some version of corrective promotion. And I think they should make their films. And I think their films, well, they're romantic comedies with two black leads, whether they be straight or queer or trans, whatever the case may be. Their beautiful representation of black people offset my more complex
Mm.
representation of black people. My favorite films aren't Moonlight isn't simple.
Not at all.
Oh, it's so complex. It leaves you wanting to ask, so it leaves you with so many questions. It's not trying to make black people look good. Who are we trying to look good for?
Mm.
Do like what is I for me that's it. I don't look at black people in a negative way. I don't feel like we need corrective promotion. Again, if someone wants to do that, I think that's fine. I think we need to be portrayed as humans with all our kinks and quirks, and I want to see black people in films as whole, and I strive for that. I want to see us be terrible people on screen, but still have redeeming qualities, because that's how you make a great character that's terrible. There has to be something there that we cling on to that we can see in ourselves. We have to
Mm.
see the worst parts of ourselves. We can't run away from them because no one is that great. No one's that great. I haven't met the person yet. So,
Hey,
that
I haven't met the person either, and I think that's something that you said about like seeing like the worst like or not I forget the exact words used, but essentially bad depictions or people with bad traits in their personality.
Mm-hmm.
Something that comes to mind because I really want to write a black superhero movie, and once again, just like he doesn't
Yeah.
have to be in Wakanda, he doesn't have to be fighting the streets and trying to save the hood. He could
Yes.
just be somebody who fell into some acid and became a superhero.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
one of the podcasters I listened to, he was talking about how he wants to see more black villains, and that's not something I had thought about, but that's just
Mm-hmm.
as important as having black villainous characters,
Yeah.
having complex, real antagonists, and what we even talked about earlier with regards to creating real complex characters. Like I want to see black people where they're complex, like people
Yeah.
of different skin tones,
Yep.
people because as you and I both know, Hollywood has a very interesting diversity and inclusion issue. It
Yeah.
always has.
Yeah.
But I think that because we have black people in films now, that everything is all fine and dandy when you people aren't asking the questions, oh, what are the color of these black people's skin? How
Yeah.
many black identities across the gender spectrum are there, across the
Yeah.
sexuality spectrum?
Yeah.
So I think that there has to be more conversations about uh, being intentional with representation in film, which is why I'm always appreciative of being able to hear from diverse directors, diverse producers, just to hear their
Yeah.
perspective on what they were thinking of when they create their projects.
For sure. Definitely.
And so I want to transition a little bit to go into what I'm calling Aaliyah's question corner. For certain guests, I reach out to their friends and I see what questions they want to ask their friends on the podcast and what they're interested in hearing. And you know your best friend. So why are you shaking your head already?
I'm interested to hear what she asked. So,
Uh, well, first things first, she really just wanted to hear us talk about storytelling. She wants to talk about her favorite films, which I think we've
yeah.
accomplished. One of the questions that she posed that I think was interesting, and I'm curious your take on it, film versus movies. Is there a difference between a film and a movie?
Interesting. That's a fun one. Um, I I guess like a dictionary definition, I'm not quite sure that there is. If anything, there's it's just a synonym. They're
Hmm.
synonyms of one another. I think I haven't really actually looked up what's a movie versus a film. But in my mind, and as a self-avowed snob, uh, film snob at least, I movies are for move the similarities between movies and films are the sheer entertainment value that they provide,
Hmm.
the sheer artistic um, intent and execution. Um, but a film, again, in my mind, and I think words mean things. At least I think the way that we use words
Hmm.
should mean something. The definition is here or there. I think language evolves, all of that. Um, but I think the ways that I choose to use words, um, I like putting things in categories. I like compartmentalizing. And so the difference is between the two that I think a film is a project that seeks to go a bit deeper,
Hmm.
that seeks to pose questions that a mainstream movie wouldn't dare pursue in such a direct way. Um, a lot of them you would, see nominated for Oscars and the big awards. Those awards don't mean as much to me anymore as they used to when I was younger. But generally speaking, there's still a lot of great movies that get nominated, and I still watch them, and
Yeah.
I still sometimes every now and then I'll watch the Oscars. But anyways, ever since Green Book won Best Screenplay, I had to check out of that shit. I was there. You can't at that point you're just telling me that is rigged. So, anyways, again, that's a tangent. But really, I think at the core of it, films seek to go deeper. They seek to ask questions that movies, well funded, seeking profit movies aren't able to. They're less restricted in my mind. I think like independent cinema is like a great exemplar of films, um, movies that sure you would hope to make some money from this, but you might not. If you break even, you did a great job because at least you were able to maintain creative integrity and you're not like having to file bankruptcy. Movies, in my mind, are meant for profit first, and if anything else comes
Hmm.
after, cool. Profit, a good time and profit. It's always either way. It has to be a good time in one way or another. Even quote unquote boring films, at least for me, can be a good time as long as the story is strong enough. So
Hmm.
across the board, we need to be having a good time here. We need to be having an interesting time here. It can't be. I can't finish watching this movie and say, well, I'll just go back to my regular life now. Then it's just a bad thing. It's just not you didn't do a great job in my mind. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
that would be the difference for me.
I definitely agree. And I love how you preface it by talking about being like a film snob because I feel that way sometimes because it's like, yeah, like there's certain things like, no, that's a movie. That's not a film.
Yeah.
Like Fast X, that's a movie.
Yeah. And that's fine. Movies are
It's
great. I
fine.
love movies. I love
It's
Godzilla in 1998. Please.
yeah,
I love movies.
exactly. Yeah, we love movies on this podcast.
Definitely.
Um, and then Aaliyah's other question, what do you think about the streaming era that we're in and its impact on film and the film industry, if there is one?
Yeah. It definitely is a huge impact, unfortunately. Um, you know, I'll also preface this answer by saying I buy movies, and I don't buy the physical copies anymore, um, because I'm a renter. I move. I don't want to be moving with. I have a lot of movies, so I don't. If I had all those in physical copy, that'd be a terrible time. Um, if I ever am able to afford to buy a house or a condo, then maybe I'll invest in physical copies. But I buy digital versions on iTunes. I only buy them on sale. I buy them when they're $5. That's my little secret. Um, but I I love quality. The digital downloads, they're as close as you can get to a Blu-ray
Hmm.
copy, as close as you can get to what the filmmakers wanted the film to look like outside of a theater. That's really important to me. Um, saying that, I said that to say streaming. My original issue with streaming was the fact that two things: quality was always sacrificed.
Hmm.
The compression on, again, you're streaming, it requires a lot of bandwidth to host all those massive files if you're going to have the full quality film and then having it being streamed to millions of households. It's a lot. I get that, which is why I just opted to buy the films that I really wanted to rewatch in the future and just watch the other ones for the first time on streaming. We're at a point now where they've just given up on quality completely. Like HBO, I listen, HBO Max, or they want to call themselves Max now, in my mind used to be easily the top.
Yeah.
I mean, HBO revolutionized television. They were the beginning of peak television, of the golden age of television, in my mind. Them and like, you know, and some people might argue AMC and some other
Hmm.
particular ones, but for me, HBO was it. Now they've thrown quality of the actual image completely out the window. Like their compression is worse than Netflix's now. That was not the case, but when Game of Thrones was like huge and it was,
Yeah.
it was a communal viewing experience, it was not that bad. Now it's unsightly, honestly. It's actually crazy to me. So that's one thing. That's just a technical personal filmmaker gripe.
Yeah.
But in terms of the impact of streaming on the industry, I mean, it's Netflix, the top dog, the kind of the they ushered in the streaming era, and during, I'd say, like 2015, 20 to like 2017, maybe 2018, it really looked like they were trying to do something
Mm-hmm.
different. Like it looked like they were trying. It looked like they were trying to make great projects. Still, they wanted to have their fun, interesting, funny. They wanted to have all those categories covered. But I still remember. I think this was 2019. I still remember the film. Like they were trying to compete with the Oscar films. They wanted to really kind of be in the club, and they were shut out a lot. Like I remember the film Roma. Again, still remember Roma losing Best Picture to Green Book.
Mm-hmm.
Black Klansman, um, Roma, and there's a few other movies that came out that year that I thought were great. Lost Best Picture and Screenplay to Green Book, a movie that's basically just a Driving Miss Daisy remake. Love Mahershala, love him. Hate that movie.
I can tell.
Fucking hate that. I hate that movie. I don't. Wow, there's something in me that whenever I think about that movie, like I get hot. But I think after losing those awards, after I was convinced that Roma was going to win, like an exceptional film, like a film,
Not a movie.
not a movie. And after being a top contender and losing, I think they really just kind of reevaluated their approach and really kind of took a turn. But even after that, they were still releasing interesting things. But now all that's on Netflix that people are talking about are reality shows. There are other things on there, sure, but the original content, because that's basically what it is that they're creating,
Mm-hmm.
is valueless. It's not sure it has an impact on the culture right now, but it won't be lasting. That's why they have to keep pushing out these random things because none of them are good enough to stick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people will watch Too Hot to Handle and Selling Sunset and all the other ridiculous ones. And again, reality shows have been around for a long time, so I'm not a reality show hater. But it's the fact that this is the model that they feel that they have to embody to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because your model in general isn't sustainable. And streaming, their big thing was that they were gonna democratize filmmaking and television, and they were going to open up more opportunities for other people. And to an extent, they have, but the way that I see streaming is the way that I see Uber. I call it the Uberification of everything. It's the same thing that happened to Uber. They Uber they entered the market presenting themselves as a better, cheaper, more flexible alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Something that was going to improve your life. It was going to make life much easier. You're not going to have to take these expensive taxis, and um, you're going to be able to, take an Uber wherever you are. It's going to be just a click of a button. Drivers are going to have a lot more opportunities. You're going to make a lot of money. It's an easy side hustle. You're going to be good. Being backed by private equity, they're able to do that. They were like bleeding money for
Yeah.
a long time. But once they cornered the market and they killed the taxis, almost completely killed the taxis, they basically made they transformed into something that was worse than the taxis, exceptionally worse. At least taxis had unions.
Talk about it.
They had pensions. They had healthcare. They were making a living. They weren't driving their own cars into the ground, completely depreciating their cars to a point where they're actually losing money they're paying Uber essentially to work. They weren't doing that. It was a stable job for a long time. They killed that stable job, that stable industry, and replaced it with something far more nefarious. Now, and I know personally, and I have a gripe at Uber because I drove Uber after college to make a living, and that shit, it made me want to not be here.
Mm.
It was a terrible time. It was awful. Streaming, the big streaming companies, they did the same thing. They presented themselves as this thing that would solve all the problems for filmmakers, present more opportunities, present more value for consumers. You didn't have to deal with ads. You could watch what all your favorite shows at the tip. You could binge. Netflix created a binging culture. Um, and then after they killed traditional media, which again, there's some merits to there being other avenues. There's a lot of merits to there being other avenues than traditional media, absolutely. But at least in traditional, and there's a lot of messed up things that would happen and still happens in traditional media. But at the very least, the unions were strong. Netflix rose out of a union strike, out
Mm.
of the writer's strike of 07 and 08. If it weren't for that writer's strike, if it weren't for the studios holding out for so long and instead investing in terrible reality shows at the time, they basically did what Netflix is doing now. If it weren't for that, if they would just pay the writers what they were asking, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. Shows used to have 22 episodes.
Man,
Writers used to get paid. Writers used to get paid a lot of money. Writing was like a legitimate career to pursue. You could make a really good living, not only as a top writer, but as just a lower level writer. You could make a decent living. You got
now,
residuals.
now you got 6 episodes for a season and only one season.
It pains me so much. It's ruined the experience for filmmakers and viewers alike. Again, it's an uberification of the film industry, the film and TV industry. You present yourself as one thing, and then you enter our lives as a Trojan horse. And then once you're in our lives, you metastasize and basically ruin everything that we cared about. And it's frustrating. And it's why I continue to buy movies, even though people have always called me crazy for doing that. Even though I buy them on sale now, I can't afford a $20 movie. I buy too many movies to buy them for $20. I don't make that kind of money. But I, you have to, nothing's free.
Yeah.
People need to make a living. Filmmakers need to make a living. Art is important. I want one person to tell me, I know there's like the weirdos that say they don't listen to music, and that's fine. It's cool. It's okay. But you probably consume some art. You're not
Everybody
just
consumes.
in your closet on the computer working all the time. You consume you consume sports. You consume something outside of your job. If athletes are getting paid millions of dollars, I mean, people people get a very similar experience from watching their favorite films as they do from their favorite sports. Why is there a compensation discrepancy? And even in sports, I mean, college athletes getting paid nothing. The most valuable artists, creatives, athletes, the people, the up and comers, the people that get to the point where they become greats are completely undervalued now. And because of that, we're going to see a very dark period of time. And I think in my opinion, we're already in that period of time now where people need time to cook. You don't
Yeah.
get a Steven Spielberg, you don't get a Martin Scorsese, you don't get all these greats, you don't get these legends unless they had time to do the work that's necessary to become great. But if there's no funding for people to be able to do that, I mean, if they can't afford rent, then they don't have the ability to try
Yeah,
to
you got to be
pursue
able to
greatness.
live in order to be able to write a
Exactly.
movie.
Exactly. And so for me, because of that underfunding and defunding of art and artists and artistry, I think there's no wonder why social media has exploded in the way that it has. Short form
Mm.
content is great. It's fun. It's cool. But it will never be no one. Why do you think TikTok is trying to encourage people to make 10-minute videos? It's not enough. The reason you scroll a lot is because you don't get enough from that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't often, at least not anymore. When I was a kid, I used to watch movie after movie after movie. But it's difficult for me to watch multiple movies successively anymore because the movies that I'm watching, they grip me so much that I want to go outside and think about how this
Yeah.
movie has changed my perspective.
Process it, think about things that you saw that maybe the ending of the movie makes you think about
Yeah,
the first scene of the movie. Yeah, it's hard for me to watch successive movies. It's like I need to watch this movie. I want to engage with it. I want to research a little bit about it, listen to a
yeah,
podcast about it. Yeah.
exactly. That's the difference. Even like 10-minute TikToks, I don't want to see it.
Yeah, because you kind of wasted my time for 10 minutes.
Exactly. Because people don't appreciate all the hard work and effort and thought that goes into making their favorite TV shows and their favorite films and their favorite movies. It is a grueling experience. You have to use parts of your brain that you've never used before. It's all problem solving. Sure, the production of it is problem solving, but the writing, the story development is a lot of problem solving. What you see on screen does not come easy. And so it isn't just creating a beautiful image and then that's it. You have to make people feel things without saying it. You have to make people think things without telling them what you want them to think. You have it's psychology, it's philosophy. A lot of films employ music, both their score and their soundtrack in the way that the movie is shaped, production design, the editing, everything that you don't see on screen, the catering, keeping people fed so that they can actually do their jobs. The
The hours
producers,
of makeup and lighting and
it
technicians.
when I think I love films and filmmaking because it's the only thing that I remain astonished by after seeing how it's done. It
Mm,
still feels impossible. Even though
it
I know what
does.
it takes, it feels even more impossible knowing what it takes. It's it's like climbing Mount Everest. It's like diving to the bottom of the well, actually, you probably shouldn't dive to the bottom of the Mariana Trench because you would die. But it's like deep sea diving. It
Yeah.
it's that impossible task that if you surmount it, you feel like a god for a second because you know that you've clasped onto a a higher power. Like being able to make people feel without saying anything, being able to make people cry through others, writing something and sure having actors perform it, but I'm making this shit up.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, this is coming out of here. Sure, it's from all the books and the movies that I've watched
Yeah.
and all the experiences that I'm kind of, transforming that into something else. But
At the end of the day, though.
like, I'm making this shit up, but you're feeling it. You're feeling it deeply. You're like,
uh,
damn, that's I know what that feels like. I
mhm.
want that. That's for me. That's what I want. I want to, if nothing else, I want to create that. And so I respect it so much that it's very difficult to see it being undervalued so deeply that people don't want to pay for movies, that people don't value it. And streaming plays a huge role in that. Why people don't value movies and TV anymore because it's so accessible. You know, people want you to pump out seasons like it's nothing. I mean, they used to do that. Those 22 episodes were not easy. Those people were working. I tell you,
Yeah.
they were
Around the clock,
working.
too.
Yeah. which ties into some messed up parts about the industry, but
Yeah,
that's a whole
that's
separate
another
thing.
story.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that we're good on time because still have like a couple of quick fire rounds, but don't want to take up too
yeah.
much of your time.
No,
Okay,
I'm good.
great.
I'm good. I'm good.
Um, yeah, just in all your answers, I think it's so evident of one, a love for the sport. Like obviously we're talking about art, but to categorize a love for the sport, like
Yeah,
you love this thing. That's why you invest so deeply into it.
yeah,
That's why you're so knowledgeable about it. Like I've definitely learned from just hearing you speak about the craft and as well, it comes from a place of great appreciation for all the different layers, all the different human beings behind all the different layers as well. And I really appreciate what you that last part about making this shit up because that's how I feel as a poet sometimes too. It's like, yeah, like these are just 5 lines, but do y'all understand that this just came out my brain? Like I made some edits, chose some words, but I just these are
yeah,
5 sentences I made up and you're
yeah,
feeling something. Give me
yeah.
my cookie.
No, for sure. No, really though. That really is what it is.
And so to transition to the tail end of the podcast, we could do this kind of like a rapid fire round.
Yeah,
First things first, I don't want to leave this podcast without people understanding more well-rounded of all the different ways that you express yourself through your writing, through film. So this morning, as I was preparing for this episode, I watched some of your short films on YouTube. I
yeah,
watched some of your video essays,
yeah.
and I just want people to get a feel for why storytelling in this way is important to you. And I think especially looking at some of the video essays you did, I think the last one I watched was America Loves Idiots.
Yeah.
And I love your craft and I love just the way your mind works. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about why video essays are important to you. I also saw that you're a photographer. Just talking a little bit about what people might want to know to get a full picture of you as an artist.
No, for sure. Thanks for checking out some of the stuff. I cringe at anybody watching my stuff, especially because every time I finish something, I always feel like, wow, I could have done so much better. That's a problem that I'm still working through in therapy. But no, the video essays, I really got into making video essays, and I haven't made one in a while because I'm trying to evolve.
Mm,
I'm it's always the goal is always to get to making films, narratives full time. It's not a straight path, but I'm willing to twist and turn as long as, again, going back to creative integrity, as long as I feel like it's still at my core, the messaging is there, the themes are there. But I got into video essays because I watched a lot of video essays. I'm really interested in the medium itself. I don't think it's something that I'm going to do full time, long term, but I wanted to take a shot at it because I feel like there's certain things that I want to say that works well in that medium that I might not have the funding or the time to make a full film out of, but I can, just get on camera and pontificate about it just a bit. Um, but yeah, I think video essays are interesting because they make essays fun.
hmm
Like I can read an essay, sure, but having someone perform it and edit it together in a way that feels like you're immersed in it reminds me a lot of what filmmaking is all about. And at its core, it's a similar it's a similar frame of thinking that goes into making those videos. Um, and similar to my photography, whenever I am shooting stuff, um, I want to capture images that feel like they could be stills
mm,
from the films that I'm thinking about making. The colors, I'm a big color person. Um, I want to like I want to learn how to play with colors more. I want to learn and practice color theory more. Um, Film as a medium, TV was born out of television. No, TV was born out of theater, which is
mm,
why there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of, you know, talking in this room, and then you cut to another room where people are talking. That's the medium trend. It transitioned into what it is now from theater. Film transitioned from a still image. It's a motion picture because the the medium of film originated from a still image, and then slapping 24 still images together and playing them successively, we found out that that created motion. It created realistic motion. Um, and so the medium, in order to be have a good eye as a director, as a cinematographer, you have to have a good eye as a photographer. And so again, in all my practice as a photographer, whenever I am capturing images, that's also what's running in the back of my mind. So again, going back to what I was speaking about earlier, I'm willing to twist and turn and do different things, but they always have to come to a point. I know what it is that I want to do. It's very clear to me. There's a lot of things that I'm confused about in the world. That's not one of them. It's probably the only thing that I'm not confused about. And so, yeah, essentially all the work that I do is to be able to be a great storyteller.
Mhm.
And then once I have that, I'll feel a lot more confident in every successive film that I make. I want to explore, or I do explore, again, like I was saying earlier, the multitudes of our experiences as humans. I want all the good and all the bad in all their extremes because I feel a lot of things in extremes. I have ADHD again. My brain is very extreme. It's all or nothing. And so that's how I experience the world. And so I think in exploring those extremes, you're able to kind of see more of the gray in between. I think when I try to run away from those extremes, I just don't feel anything at all.
Mhm.
Um, so I think in my work, I really want to show the best of people, show the worst of people. Um, I'm trying to go lean more into darker comedy in the stuff that I'm working on from here on out, at least the films that I'm writing. I'm trying to figure out where I want to take my YouTube channel. Because like you said, I've been doing video essays. The last like 5 videos I released, or 4 or 5, were video essays on just topics that I was thinking about, books that I was reading. But I want to go beyond that. I want to push more towards telling stories and less of a sit down talking head um, setup. And I want to I want to play around more. I believe in my eye as a photographer and as a cinematographer.
Mhm.
I like playing with lighting. There's a lot I can do with sound. I've been working in social media, but a lot of that has been as an editor. There's a lot that I can do there as well. And so I want to showcase my skills a bit more. So I'm still working through that. Um, it's going to definitely be an investment, but I'm cooking. I'm building up. I'm doing something.
Hey, cooking for sure. And I just love the way your brain works. Like I've definitely been inspired throughout this episode. And if you're ever leading a writing room and need a writer who happens to be a poet, you know where to
For
hit me.
sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just a few more questions before we get out of here. These should be
Yeah.
relatively quick. First things first, what is your Zen place? So, what are either physical places or a set of
Mm.
circumstances that bring you to a peaceful state of mind?
Well, the first one would be my couch. I like laying on my couch and watching TV. It's a great place for me. Honestly, I think the reason why I was so comfortable, I wasn't comfortable because I was sleeping on the couch. I was in my third year. I was sleeping on the couch of like a bunch of second year students in like an open living room. It was a wild time. I don't know what I was. I would never do that now at all. But my couch in my own house, in my own apartment, I love just kind of laying on. I don't get these days a lot. They're usually when I'm forced to take them, when I'm just completely overwhelmed by life. But when I'm able to just be a couch potato and just zone in whatever it is that I'm watching, um, it it's definitely the way I reset after I've been doing a lot and been experiencing a lot, and I need to just like
Mm.
sit with myself. Um, and then outside of that, I'd say definitely the movie theater. I mean, there's nothing like it. Um, I have a different experience when the movie theater is full versus when it's empty, and I choose when I go based on what experience I want to have. When I really want to
Absolutely.
sit with myself and just experience it and share that experience with myself only, I'll go in the middle of the day. My schedule is really flexible, so I'm able to do that.
Same.
Um,
It's a perfect time to go, honestly, when you really want to just indulge. Like, it's a fantastic experience.
it's just the best. It's just nothing like it. And then similar to that, there's nothing like going opening night to a movie that you've been really looking forward to, that you really want to share with a bunch of people. I still remember that's how I saw Hereditary, and that was just a great time. That was just a great time. Or just recently, it's not as, certainly not nearly as good of a movie, but Madam Web, seeing
Oh
that
my
movie in a
God.
full crowd, there'll be nothing like it. Ah, man, there's
The
something.
thing
There's
about
something.
my, I had a full crowd for or full-ish crowd for Madam Web too, and
Yeah.
for me, it was the moments when the joke just didn't land at all. I was like, "Geez, there are 100 something people in this room, and nobody even budged."
And when people would laugh out loud at the wrong moments. And I was looking around and I was there with my partner. And I was just like, we were both so confused. I didn't know what I was experiencing. But at the end of it, I was very grateful that I had that experience.
Oh my gosh! And then the ADR,
Oh God.
it was so much with Madam Web that just watching a
Man,
bad movie in a full audience could be a great time sometimes.
it was one of the best experiences that I've had in the movie theater in a while, even though the movie was certainly not, oh, it needed work or it needed less work. It was very clear that the studio had way too heavy of a hand in the project. It felt like all the worst ideas of a studio executive thrown into an already mediocre film that it was going
Me
to be. But
Mediocre's kind too. I just when she had that Pepsi can in her hand and was not about to drink that product placement ass Pepsi, I was like, what are we doing here? On the
and the
flip
Pepsi
side of that
Cola
though,
sign.
psh, when I saw Bottoms in theaters, I had a full audience for Bottoms, and that was
Mm.
such a fun time. Like that was a great time.
I still haven't seen that movie. I bought it because
Oh,
again, it
you
was on
have to
sale.
see it. I recommended it to Aaliyah, and Aaliyah loved
Okay.
it. You have to see it.
I
Bottoms is
love
fantastic.
I that's one Ayo, right? Or
Yeah,
Ayo. I love her. So definitely like I bought it just off the sheer value of her being in it. Um it's definitely on my list.
you have to watch that. Like I
It's definitely on my list.
Ask Aaliyah's opinion because you have to see
Okay.
that.
It's definitely there. It's definitely up there for sure.
Uh, oh, I love talking about movies. We could literally be on a podcast for 17 hours talking about movies,
Oh
Trey.
no, definitely. I'm trying to hold myself back. There's so many. There's so many of them.
Hey, that's why the podcast exists, though. You can come back on this
Yeah,
podcast whenever you want to get your movie takes off or whatever we need to do. I definitely want to tap in.
for sure.
Uh, Speaking of tapping in, where can people find you and how can people support you on your journey?
For sure. A few places. Uh, I'm on YouTube at Trae Whyte. That's just the name. That's the name of the channel. Um, it's under renovation. I'm working on it. Like I said, I'm cooking. I'm making some stuff happen. And trying to find a way where I can be more consistent. Um, I'm definitely going to need to outsource some stuff so that I can be more consistent. Can't really do everything myself when I'm trying to do it at the scale that I'm trying to. But I'm working on it. Um, so that's YouTube. I'm on TikTok. I post very sporadically on there, like random takes on societal stupidity. At jamrock_Trae. Um, JAMROCK, one word underscore my first name. Um, Again, very sporadically. I'm not trying to be a TikToker. Ugh. I don't. That's not the medium I want to work in. But every now and then I'll use it. Um, my Vimeo is also Trae at Trae Whyte. I don't post any video essays on Vimeo. I'll only post my films and stuff. It's basically just like a portfolio uh,
Hmm.
platform for me, and for a lot of filmmakers and creatives. And then my website again is TraeWhite.com.
And it's White with a H
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
Y.
White with H, Trae, spelled differently, and then last name Whyte. Um, and yeah, and if you want to check out, I recently started a production company. We didn't talk about this, but yeah, I recently started a production company. And the website for that is just Studio Brenton, BRENTON.com. Just started that website, and that's going to be where everything that I produce from here on out is going to be under the Studio Brenton um, a name. And so anything that I make under that name will be on that website as well. Um, yeah, and I think those are the main places.
And I love this tagline: Studio Brennan is a film and video production company creating narratives that make sense from the nonsense of the human experience.
Yes, sir. That is the goal.
I love it. There's so much that we could have talked about on this episode. I mean, you were a part of the Quiet on Set documentary. We got your short
Yes,
films that we have here, so definitely going to have you back on an episode in the future.
definitely.
But before we close out, I usually ask people about some of their inspirations. But for you specifically, I want you to tell our listeners about the local Cheswick branch library back in Jamaica, as well as the bootleg DVD guys in your community, because I've read that while perusing your website, and I needed to learn a little bit more about that.
That's so funny. That's a deep dive for sure. That's so funny. I specifically remember the article that I wrote that for. Or yeah. Um, man, the community I lived in Jamaica, middle of nowhere, back of the woods. But it was called Cheswick, the district. And I grew up during the kind of the introduction of social media into the world. It was definitely like MySpace was there, Facebook was definitely there during that time, but I didn't have access to internet at home. The only place I ever had access to internet was at my local library or like an internet cafe that I'd have to drive further to get to. Um, you'd go to an internet cafe to like play computer games, but um, the library was in walking distance for Jamaicans. Walking
Yeah.
distance to Jamaicans is far, but in walking distance. And so I would go down there all the time and just either be on the internet like on Facebook, or reading, and I gained my love of stories and words through the books that I'd read as a kid. I read a lot of YA fiction at the time. Um, and I don't read as much anymore. I try to because it's a fun genre to be in,
Mm.
but I'm a little bit more intellectual now for better or worse. But that's really where I got my love for words and for storytelling and for writing. Um, and the local again, local,
Yeah.
far away,
Relative.
well, local enough. Bootleg DVD men, they would like, oh man, they would have a tarp when you go to like the market, or you go to it's called Marant Bay. That's like the central hub of where you would go to get the things that you would need: produce, medication. The hospital was down there. It was completely removed from where I was living, but it would be like maybe like a 30 or 45-minute drive on public transportation. Um, and when you would go, there'd be all across the little area that the market encompassed. You would have these guys with like this really huge tarp with stacks of like bootleg DVDs. Like that was the thing because you couldn't afford the closest theater was in Kingston, which was like over 2 hours away, and nobody had movie money. Like no one, it just wasn't a thing. I never saw a movie in Jamaica in a
Mm.
theater. The first time I saw a movie was here in America. So that was where I had to get my movies from. Again, I didn't have internet, so needed these ripoffs. And my favorites were even then I was a man of quality. Okay. I didn't the shitty versions of the movies, I just wasn't interested. Okay. I needed at the time the best version was like 480p. I needed the
Oof.
480p. Like I couldn't the other shit, the 360, no. And I needed the case. I needed them to print it on quality paper. I needed the color fidelity to be right. I wouldn't buy it if it was anything else. Wouldn't buy it. So essentially, what I wanted was not the versions where they would bring a camera to the theater and record it, but
Then you see
instead,
somebody in the front row getting up, getting popcorn, and people coughing over the recording.
I was not having that shit even back then. Even back then, I knew the value of my mind and of my time. Um, so yeah, no, but that's really where my love of movies came to be. And like even TV shows, you would buy TV shows on those bootleg DVDs as well. They were super cheap. You could get a bunch of them at once, and they were readily available. And so I would watch them all the time. My mom didn't like me going outside because crazy shit would be happening.
Yeah.
But so I was inside a lot watching movies with her, with my older sister when she was there, um, or by myself. And so I just spent a lot. Again, Godzilla, the Anaconda movies. That was, all those kinds of movies were movies you'd be able to see. Um, and so yeah, I love American cinema. I think as a filmmaker and as a a self-avowed film snob, when you're in community with other filmmakers, there's a lot of people that love European cinema, Japanese cinema, German cinema, and they're excellent movies that come out of those markets. But I love American cinema because I grew up on American cinema. It's what inspired me to want to make movies. There's a lot of great things that came out of Hollywood. And I hate when we turn our nose up at it because movies are what they are now. Well, let me not say that because that might not be that might not be a flex. But the movies that we love are what they are now because of Hollywood,
Right.
and it isn't all bad, not even close. There's a lot of terrible shit, but this is America. We do terrible really well here. It's just a part of it.
Terrible is our shit.
It really is. But I can't discount the impact that American cinema has had on my life and my perspective on the world. And so just going back, thinking back about how foundational a lot of those movies that I saw were to me and how they still impact me today and how I still get moved by the experience of watching them. Even though some of them weren't just not that great, but I still feel those emotions that I felt as a kid and I still feel inspired to do something different, to do something more interesting, more timely, but still just to make shit, good shit. Um, yeah,
Love it. I think the story lived up to what I was hoping for. So I'm happy that I went ahead and asked that question. And then the last question of the pod, Trae, just our takeaways or lessons learned from this episode. What are you taking away with you from having done this interview, as well as what do you hope our listeners are taking away with them as they end their YouTube video or their Spotify play?
for sure. I think I don't really do interviews that often. Um, like the written, I've done a few written ones. And this is maybe my second face to face one. Um, but it's always good to talk to someone else, especially like you say, you're kind of in your discovery phase of how you're exploring your own artistic pursuits. And I love talking to people who are just discovering their love for films and filmmaking and writing because it's the best time. It's just the best time. You're not jaded yet. Everything seems so possible. And it is. Things are possible. There's an ebb and flow, but
Yeah.
I think yeah, I think kind of hearing about you talk about kind of your discovery of it reminds me of my discovery and just being able
Mm,
to talk through that again. I think through a lot of things in my head, but I don't say a lot of things out loud that I probably should do more often. And I think just talking through that again, it's always revitalizing to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing.
mm,
So that's definitely a huge takeaway for me. And I think a takeaway for people watching: invest in movies, man. Invest in
mm,
movies that you like and TV shows that you like, that you think are good. They might not be the same ones that I think are good, and that's okay. And that's okay. But and I'm not saying you have to do what I do and go out and buy all the movies and do all of that. I just think movies, good movies, great movies are gonna die off. People that we used to think that we were in an exceptional age for black filmmakers, for black creatives, but I think we're finding out now that progress doesn't come without pushback. I think a lot of people in the industry now think that, hey, we've gotten to the point where we're equal, we're good. You have it. You're in movies, you're in TV shows,
leave us alone
but
now.
like black people, shows are still getting canceled. Issa Rae had one of the biggest shows. She's still having to fight to get stuff made, having shows get canceled. I mean, Shonda Rhimes, she's an exception. Shonda Rhimes is she's beyond the rest of us. Um, but like there's so many people that are still fighting to do what it is that they love and trying to make stuff that we love. Like every black people loved Insecure. That's because Issa Rae got in at a time where there was an opening. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of closing of doors going on that I don't think is as readily apparent. And even if you enter the door, people that someone that worked on The Bear, a hugely popular show, again going back to AO, um, was working in a movie theater when the show was on air. Was working a job that I did in college to make a living. It's not sustainable. And if you want to keep seeing the movies and TV shows that you love, the TikToks are going to get old. They're going to serve their purpose, but they can never replace the experience of watching a great film or a TV show. It's just not. But if you want to keep seeing those, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is. And we're in a recession. So again, you don't have to go out and buy all the movies and do all the things, but whatever little bit that you can do to support the people that are making the great shit that you want to see, that you're seeing, or the people that are trying to do that, I think it's important to lend that support wherever you can, because no one gets there alone. And because of that, the people that are doing it right now are the people that don't share your experiences, that won't reflect your experiences. You're seeing a lot of tired shows and movies because a lot of tired people are in the position of being able to make those things. The people that are interesting, that are relevant, have to fight a lot harder to get anything made, and even then, they'll get something made and have it canceled, have it written off on these companies' taxes, so that
Taxes, yeah.
they don't have to release it, so that they can save some money on taxes. So really, that's why a lot of people have Patreons. That's why a lot of people have memberships, a lot of creatives, because that's the only way that they're able to sustain themselves. You can't be an exceptional creative and also be working two other full-time jobs. It's just impossible. So really, we have to start putting our money where our mouth is, quite frankly, when it comes to art and artists.
Couldn't have said it better. My takeaway is going to be alluding to what you said about earlier in the podcast about we consume a lot of art but hate our artists, and I think you
Oh,
just so eloquently just stated all the reasons why. So, uh, Trey, I'm absolutely floored by just your knowledge, your love for film, and your depth of perspective of the industry and the work that goes into it. So, I want to thank you again for so much of your time on a Friday to have a conversation with me on this podcast. Listeners, want to thank y'all for sticking in through the end as well. If y'all haven't already, make sure y'all like, subscribe, leave the 5-star rating. This is more than 5-star content, so leave that 5-star rating. And make sure y'all stick around and check out other episodes. We mentioned Aaliyah a couple times on the pod. She has an episode of the Banquet Hall, so go ahead and jump on over to her episode next. And yeah, just honored to be in your presence, Trae. Excited to see you grow as a filmmaker, as an artist, and looking forward to 20 years from now when your Oscar acceptance speech, you're talking about that time on the Banquet Hall podcast when you were talking about film.
Hey, I'll talk about that, but I'll also say I still have not forgiven y'all niggas for giving Green Book that best screenplay nomination and win. Y'all bitches were fake, you were unreal, and you were frauds, and you showed your ass. And I've never forgiven you. I promise to God, if an Oscar is not even like at the forefront of my mind, but if I ever win one, oh, they're hearing about it. Listen. But yes, thank you for having me.
I set you up for that, but I did not expect that.
I swear to God.
All right, listeners, thank y'all for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next time.